going to show you a swimming mermaid tail. I have done a few other designs using this technique. The first time was part of NTNA and I made a mermaid, and I never showed you a mermaid tail using that style. So I'm going to redo it this time, but instead of acrylic, this one is all done with acrygel, and I mixed the color, and it actually was very easy to do it this way comparatively than using acrylic. I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to get my future videos as well.
So we are going to begin by making a custom color to use for this mermaid tail. So I'm going to squeeze out a healthy dollop of some acrygel, add some blue since I want my mermaid tail to be blue, and sprinkle in some glitter. And then I'm just going to mix it up and see where this combination leads me. So when you're mixing something like this, the gel polish is going to thin out your acrygel, the glitter is going to thicken it. So you kind of want to just maintain a balance as you're working on it. If it doesn't seem blue enough, go ahead and mix in some more of your gel polish. If it seems too glittery, you're going to have to add more acrygel. So kind of go slow and steady and build it up. Once you're happy with your color of whatever color mix you have, then you're going to apply the form to your nail. This will not work on top of a pre-made nail form. It has to be sculpted out. So we're going to fit the form to the nail, press it down. We're going to fit this as if it were a stiletto, make sure it's nice and even, and then pinch it down and close it at the end. I'm going to grab a scoop of that acrygel that we made, and I'm going to apply it to the nail, and I'm going to begin pressing it out. This is a case where if you are making this and it's multiple nails or it's part of a set, make sure you make enough acrygel to do the whole set. You don't want to have to try to remix it because you're never going to get it to be exactly the same. So if anything, you want to mix a little bit more than you feel like you're going to need because you don't want to have to try to remix it. And the other thing is just try to make a little bit more because it doesn't save very well unless you have a really UV enclosed container. It'll cure in whatever you try to save it in typically. And so don't try to save it necessarily unless you're confident in whatever situation you have. And so you don't want to waste products either. It's a balance. It's, that careful, oh, did I make enough? Did I make too little? So just try to do your best. So I'm going to smooth this out as best I can. Don't spend too terribly much time on it. I spent way more time on this particular stage than I needed to smoothing it out perfectly because now we're going to go and we're going to just attack it. I'm going to take a craft knife that is dipped into some clear acrylic powder, and I'm going to cut my enhancement. I'm going to first cut it right below the free edge, and then I'm going to cut it right above where we want the tail to, so the tail fins. Cut it where you want the tail fins to be. And then in that middle area, so this has to be a long nail as well. In that middle area, cut it down the middle the other direction so that you almost cut a letter I into your enhancement. From this part, just kind of adjust it a little bit if you need to. And then you're going to cut the two sides that you just formed, those two little middle areas, into several sections. Do however many you feel is right. 4 is probably the minimum. If you're doing a longer nail and you could do more, that'd be great. Otherwise, depending on the texture of your acrygel, if you could do the same amount of length but make each segment a little smaller, that would be good as well. I found with acrylic that I could get them to be a little bit tighter, a little smaller, but with the acrygel they had to be bigger. So it's a balance. After you have cured this nail completely, cleanse it, and then begin taking off your pieces. Do so in a way that you can remember where they are. You may have to kind of pop them apart almost as if they were like perforated material or perforated paper. Just kind of like snap them back and forth and they'll pop apart. But try to keep them organized so that you know which one was where. That is a really hard thing to do, keep them organized. It seems like it should be easy, but they turn and they move and you accidentally bump them. There's so many things that'll get them a little bit just in the wrong spot, but try your best to keep track of where they belong. As you're putting them all together, just like as you can see, I have them aligned on the side. Remove the form then from the nail and file the nail into shape. Don't try to file those little tiny pieces, just be okay with however they are. Then we're going to paint a long, thin strip of gel top coat. And then after that's been cured, you can peel it off. I used a silicone mat. I missed that part. Paint the long, thin strip on a silicone nail art mat. And then we're going to just trim one edge of it. Tip that edge that's cut into some jewelry gel. This can be jewelry gel or crystal gel. Sometimes it's called like bubble gel or putty. There's different names, but it's the nail gel glue that's really thick and holds onto crystals and rhinestones really, really well. That's what you want to use. And use that to attach this thin membrane of gel polish onto the end of the nail right down the center. Use more of your blue gel mix, the acrygel mix, to just secure that little membrane onto the nail with a little bit more grip. You don't want it to be delicate. Obviously, this whole thing is still very delicate, but the better it is, the stronger it is, the better. Now we're going to start assembling our tail sections. So I'm going to grab the first ones, and this is the top row, and I'm going to stick them on. As soon as those two are done, you may need to use a finger to prop them up a little bit. Make sure your hands are gloved. Then you're going to flash cure it. So we're doing the same, it's the same jewelry gel that we did before. That's what we're using to glue these pieces on. If you, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like you can do 2 at a time, it's like a 1 at a time scenario. In order to keep them where they're supposed to be, that's fine. Don't try to rush the process. Sometimes they just don't cooperate, which is what you can see here. And you have to re-dip them and start over again just with that one piece. Don't use a tiny amount of the jewelry gel. Use enough that it will actually hold. And then you're going to go through and do the other side. It's fine to do one of them at a time. There's no issue with that. Remember that you're working with products that are a little bit tricky, and especially in a circumstance like this where you're making something that's just crazy, that things are probably going to go wrong. You're going to have to do something twice. And for me, it was just dipping that one little segment of the tail twice, which I'm okay with. That is not a problem for me to have to dip that twice, because that probably means that there isn't something else that's going to go wrong. I always plan on some disaster, kind of like when you go on a road trip and you know there's going to be some disaster along the way. You just don't know what it's going to be. I traveled a lot. I did a lot of road trips when I was a teenager with my mom, and we ran out of gas. We had our brakes go out. We went to a hotel that didn't have a reservation. You know, every time we did a road trip, there was some issue. And I have the same philosophy with a crazy nail design like this. I just assume there's going to be one oopsie somewhere along the way that I have to redo. And I'm grateful if it's something easy. So after you have all of those little segments attached going all the way across, then you can go through and just smooth them out so that you don't have that little dip between them. It's also going to add an incredible amount of strength with more of that blue acrygel mix that you have. Once that's done, you can cut off the end of that gel top coat membrane that's coming out the end, and then you can attach the last tail piece. As you are attaching that last tail piece, you want to make sure that you do leave a gap from that on the membrane as well so that it wiggles. That little space between each segment is where you're allowing the tail to wiggle back and forth. So the bigger the gap, the more wiggling opportunities there are, but also kind of the weirder it looks. So you have to try to balance it between how big of a gap you have and how much wiggling you want there to be. Also, the more segments you have, the more wiggling there is. So if you have 4, you get a pretty good movement out of it. But if you say just had 3, it wouldn't move nearly as much. But if you could say manage 6, then you'd have a lot of movement. And the more segments you have, the closer you can space them and get the same amount of curve when you're moving the tail back and forth. So if you can, if you only have 3 segments, maybe you need to space them out a little farther than I did. But if you have 6, you can probably squeeze them together a little closer. And it's hard to know exactly where to put the spacing and how to work all of that out, especially the first time you're making something like this, because you can't really test it. It's something where you have to just see how it is at the end and kind of play it by ear. So maybe you'll want to make a couple of these. They're fun anyway. On a nail form backing with the same acrygel mix, I did sculpt the 2 tail fins just kind of by eye. If you want to make sure that they're really close to the same thing, as close as you possibly can get, draw out a template on a piece of paper first, lay the nail form backing on top of it, and then create those tail fins on top of your template that you made. That way you have a little bit of a peace of mind that they're going to be about the same size. I added a little bit of a poofiness with it's a 3D, it's like a puffy gel. And then I'm going to be just using a chrome pen to add a little bit of a holographic chrome over the top. I'm going to blend it out with my gloved finger. And then I'm going to take those little tail fin pieces off, dip them into my jewelry gel. I love jewelry gel. It's like the best invention since gel. And I'm going to hold that onto the end. This one, you really have to make sure that you have something to prop it up on because it is so heavy it does want to tip. So use a pinky like I am. This is something of a trick, holding onto my practice finger and keeping that little piece propped up and holding my Flash Cure flashlight. Also, Flash Cure flashlights, that's the other best invention since the creation of gel. Jewelry gel and Flash Cure flashlights, those are like top of my list. I could not live without either one. Or at least create my things, my creations without those 2 things. So after you have the little bit of your tail attached, it's a temporary attachment with the jewelry gel. Oh, and by the way, every time I complete a step and I move on to the next thing, I do fully cure that stage. So after those tail pieces were flash cured, I did stick them into my lamp and then I secured them with more of the acrygel. Now that we've got that done, I'm going to take a silver gel art line brush. I think that's gel art, yeah. Lining gel paint. So it's like a gel paint and a little liner brush bottle. I'm going to be adding a scale pattern over the top of my mermaid. This does add a whole nother element of stuff happening on top of this. If you find you like just the glittery and the scales and you consider that to be plenty pattern, you can skip this step. I love painting scales. I think they're so much fun just to do. They're very, it's like meditation. You can kind of just get in a zone and you make the little scales going back and forth. So it's something that if I have the opportunity to paint scales, I usually take it because I really enjoy it. If that's not the case for you, you can skip them. I went back and forth on whether I thought this design would benefit from scales, but like I said, I enjoy them. So here they are. I'm going to add a little bit of a lining throughout the tail fins. And then once you're happy with your tail, and this could be so many different gorgeous colors, it can be done. However, like I said, there's always opportunities for more. I'm going to apply some jewelry gel right along the cuticle and then some gel top coat over everything, making it nice and shiny, sealing in that gel paint and making sure that everything just has that really glossy, wet sheen. It's a mermaid tail, so it needs to have that wetness to it. And after you have your gel top coat applied to everything, wait to cure. And then before you stick that in your lamp, which is so tempting because you're afraid to smudge it, at least if you're me, press some little studs that are seashell shapes and sea stars and some rhinestones right along the cuticle just to finish it off. To me, that almost felt like the very top of a mermaid's tail where her hips are, where the tail kind of meets body, because then you have the finger, which would be like body of the mermaid, and you've got the tail coming out. I like that little edging. I thought it really finished it off. Of course, it is completely optional, as with anything with art. If you are deciding to be inspired by something, you can take whatever elements you like and discard any elements you don't. Once you have enough of a little crystal encrustment, you can go ahead and cure this and it's all done. I really do enjoy this. I love how it moves, and I've made a few others of these, like I've said, the one in NTNA that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, as well as I did an elephant trunk that was super cool. If you're interested in either of those videos, I will put a link to them in the description box below, so definitely check those out. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy, and I will see you all next time. Bye!